We are a nation of laws, and yet there are some laws not written in the books that might be good for us to know or be reminded of. Dr. Nick joins us this morning with more. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Whitney, always.
They call them the 12 laws of karma, right?
Of happiness, 12 laws of happiness, and I'm not quite sure where they came from, but it's from looking at them, it looks like that they're steeped in history. You know, kind of some of those rules that guide us that are never going to go away, no matter what changes technologically. And several of them that I really liked. I think probably the first one was, you know, what we put out is going to want to come back to us.
Yes.
And it's going to come back to us.
Yes.
What we put out. So
even scientifically, we can prove that.
we can prove that, right?
For every action, there's an equal reaction.
There's an equal reaction. I always think of in terms of the energy. You know, Oprah's line: be aware of the energy you bring into this room. Mm-hmm. You're having an effect. But what the law seems to be saying is that it's going to come back to you. So if there's really pushing out negativity, that's what's going to come back to you, and you're going to find yourself going back and forth in that cycle.
And there's a law of creation. Tell me about that.
Well, the law, I really believe this, and these are some of the arguments I have with people who sometimes say, well, it's all God's work. You know, well, both are true. It may be all God's work or all divine intervention, but I also am making the life. That's the law of creation, is that we have to make life happen. You have to make a segment come to be. Mm-hmm. Huh? Mm-hmm. And there's the law of creation. And we talked about creativity before, I believe.
Yes.
So it's an important law that we have to make it happen.
You create.
We can't just sit around waiting.
Yeah, it's not like planting the seed and watching.
yeah, exactly. The law of humility is that understanding that, which I really, really like. Before we can really change anything, we must accept it. I was working with someone who came to terms with his alcoholism and said, I really need help. I am a drunk. And it was powerful, Whitney.
Did it take a long time to get there?
Of course it did. Mm-hmm. And I, you know, this is not breaking any confidence because it's a universal theme. When we face, I need help, or when we face, it's the acceptance. That's when we can really start changing it.
Right, right. In fact, some of these sound similar to what, speaking of alcoholism, AA.
Very
right?
much so.
Right?
Very much so, yeah.
And I think a lot of us know these, but it's just so good to be reminded, because then there's the law of responsibility.
The law of responsibility, and then the law of connection. Well, responsibility that we have to take responsibility for our lives, which again, all these things may sound, well, I know that. Well, what I love to say to people sometimes when they throw that back at me, well, I know that. And I said, I know you know it here.
Know it here?
Here and here.
Oh, live it.
The behavior, walk it. Mm-hmm. And that's when I know that not I, but that the nerve has been struck. Because again, we can know a whole lot of things and not walk the walk.
Do you know something?
Or walk the talk.
Right. Do you know something happened in my late 20s? And I promise you it changed the way every employer I ever worked for, every boss I ever had, every friendship I ever had, every relationship that I had, it completely changed it. And I don't know if I was too afraid to do it before, but if you don't do this, I'm going to tell you it's going to make a world of difference in your life. Instead of making excuses for things that I did wrong or things that I messed up, because I do that, you know, more than I want to.
Well, and especially in your 20s.
Sure, but I would just say, I'm so sorry. It is my fault. And here's how I'm not going to let it happen again. But it's amazing what happens to the other person when you take responsibility instead of blaming it on other people or blaming it on this or blaming it on that. You just say, you own it.
You own it.
It's amazing.
That goes right in line with the acceptance and being able to change it. I own it. It's throwing up a white handkerchief. Yeah. I don't want to fight. I did it.
Yeah, and it wasn't, you know, it's nothing you really want to own. I mean, because it's usually not your best side or your best virtues, but it makes a world of difference in that relationship. I think there's honesty in that, and there's people love ownership.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's the law of patience and reward. Which most of us struggle with. Which means just keep going, right?
Persistence.
Persistence.
Persistence and patience go hand in hand. Build momentum, accept, the stages, but, again, you got to have persistence with the show. You got to have persistence when you're learning something new.
Sure.
You have persistence when you get 5 no's. And it's like, okay, that's 5 no's. A yes has got to be coming.
Right.
You hear the whole.
Yes.
It's patience and persistence that all is going to be well. And I think that's probably the most exciting of all the laws.
Yeah.
The most exciting, that if we're persistent and patient and we just keep moving, we'll get what we need.
Right.
The world will reward us.
And it's not always what we want, perhaps, but we will get what we need.
Yes. We will get what we need.
That should fall under the laws of acceptance in there.
Yeah. Well, I often talk about, there's a major difference between what I want and what I need.
Sure.
A whole lot of things I want that I don't need.
Yeah, I wanted 3 donuts for breakfast. I do not need 3 donuts for breakfast.